Madam President.
Senator from Kentucky.
I'm pleased today to come to the floor of the Senate to talk about the Patriot Act. I'm pleased that we have cracked open the door, that we will shed some light on the Patriot Act. I wish the door were wider open, the debate broader and more significant, but we will talk a little bit about the constitutionality today of the Patriot Act. I was a co-sponsor of Senator Lay's amendment, and I think it would have gone to many great steps forward to make sure that we have surveillance on what our government does. He would have authorized audits and the Inspector General to continue to watch over, to make sure that government is not invading the rights of private citizens, and I do support that wholeheartedly. Jefferson said that if we had a government of angels, we wouldn't have to care or be concerned about the power that we give to government. Unfortunately, sometimes we don't have angels in charge of our government. Sometimes we can even get a government in charge that would use the power of government in a malicious or malevolent way to look at the banking records of people they disagree with politically, to look at the religious practices of people they disagree with. So it's very important that we are always vigilant, that we are eternally vigilant of the powers of government, that they not grow to such an extent that government could be looking into our private affairs for nefarious reasons. We have proposed two amendments that we will have votes on today. One of them concerns the Second Amendment. I think it's very important that we protect the rights of gun owners in our country, not only for hunting, but for self-protection, and that the records of those in our country who own guns should be secret. I don't think the government, well-intentioned or not well-intentioned, should be sifting through millions of records of gun owners. Why? There have been times, even in our history, when government has invaded your household to take things from you. In the 1930s, government came into your household and said, "Give us your gold." Gold was confiscated in this country in 1933. Could there conceivably be a time when government comes into your house and says, "We want your guns"? Well, people say that's absurd. That would never happen. I hope that day never comes. I'm not accusing anybody of being in favor of that, but I am worried about a government that is sifting through millions of records without asking, are you a suspect? Without asking, are you in league with foreign terrorists? Are you plotting violent overthrow of your government? By all means, if you are, let's look at your records. Let's put you in jail. Let's prosecute you. But let's not sift through hundreds of millions of gun records to find out whether or not you own a gun or not. Let's don't leave those data banks in the hands of government where someday those could be abused. What we're asking for are procedural protections. The Constitution gave us those protections. The Second Amendment gives you the right to keep and bear arms. The Fourth Amendment is equally important. It gives you the right to be free of unreasonable search. It gives you the right to say the government must have probable cause. There must be at least some suspicion that you are committing a crime before they come into your house or before they go into your records, wherever your records are. The Constitution doesn't say that you only have protection of records that are in your house. You should have protection of records that reside in other places. Just because your Visa record resides with a Visa company doesn't make it any less private. If you look at a person's Visa bill, you can find out all kinds of things about them. If you look at a person's Visa bill, you can find out what doctors they go to. Do they go to a psychiatrist? Do they have mental illness? What type of medications do they take? If you look at my Visa bill, you can tell what type of books I read, what type of magazines I read. One of the provisions of the Patriot Act is called the library provision. They can look at the books you check out in the library. Well, people say, well, still a judge has to sign these warrants, but we changed the standard. The standard of the Fourth Amendment was probable cause. They had to argue or at least convince a judge that you were a suspect, that you were doing something wrong. Now the cause or the standard has been changed to relevance. So it could be that you went to a party with someone who was from Palestine, who gives money to some group in Palestine that may well be a terrorist group or not. But the thing is, because I went to a party with them, because I know that person, am I now somehow connected enough to be relevant? And they would say, well, your government would never do that. They would never go and investigate people. The problem is, this is all secret. So I don't know if I've been investigated. My visa bills sometimes have been $5,000. Sometimes we pay for them over the phone, which is a wire transfer. Have I been investigated by my government? I don't know. It's secret. What I want are protections. I want to capture terrorists. Sure, if terrorists are moving machine guns and weapons in our country, international terrorists, by all means, let's go after them. But you know, the worst people, the people we want to lock up forever, the people all of us universally agree, people who commit murder, people who commit rape, we want to lock them up and throw away the book, and I'm all with you. But we still have the protections of the Fourth Amendment. If someone is running around in the streets of Washington tonight at 4 in the morning and we think they may have murdered someone, we will call a judge and we will get a warrant. Just because we believe in procedural protections, just because we believe in the Constitution, doesn't mean that we don't want to capture terrorists, but we just want to have some rules. I'll give you an analogy. Right now, you've been to the airport. Most of America has been to the airport at some point in time in the last year or two. Millions of people fly every day. But we're taking this shotgun approach. We think everyone's a terrorist. So everyone's being patted down. Everyone's being strip searched. We are putting our hands inside the pants of 6-year-old children. I mean, have we not gone so far? Are we so afraid that we're willing to give up all of our liberty in exchange for security? Franklin said, if you give up your liberty, you'll have neither. If you give up your liberty in exchange for security, you may well wind up with neither. Because we take this shotgun approach, we take this approach that everybody's a potential terrorist, I think we actually are doing less of a good job in capturing terrorists. Because if we spend our time going after those who are committing terrorism, maybe we'd spend less time on those who are living in this country, children and otherwise, frequent business travelers who are not a threat to our country. Instead of wasting time on these people, we could spend more time on those who would attack us. I'll give you an example. The underwear bomber. For goodness sake, his dad reported him. His dad called the U.S. Embassy and said, my son is a potential threat to your country. We did nothing. He was on a watch list. We still let him get on a plane. He'd been to Nigeria. He'd been to Yemen twice. For goodness sakes, why don't we take half of the people in the TSA who are patting down our children and let's have them look at the international flight manifest of those traveling from certain countries who could be attacking us? For goodness sakes, why don't we target who we're looking at? My other amendment concerns banking records. 8 million banking records have been looked at in our country. Not by the government. They've empowered your bank to spy on you. Every time you go into your bank is asked to spy on you. If you make a transaction more than $5,000, the bank is encouraged to report you. If the bank doesn't report you, they get a large fine in the tune of $100,000 or more. They could get 5 years in prison. They are over-encouraged. The incentive is for the bank to report everyone. So once upon a time, these suspicious activity reports were maybe 10,000 in a year. There are now over 1 million of these suspicious activity reports. Do I want to capture terrorists? Yes. Do I want to capture terrorists who are transferring large amounts of money? Yes. But you know what? When we're wasting time on 8 million transactions, the vast majority of these transactions being law-abiding U.S. citizens, we're not targeting the people who would attack us. Let's do police work. If there are terrorist groups in the Middle East and we know who they are, let's investigate them. If they have money in the U.S. or they're transferring it between banks, by all means, let's investigate them. But let's have some constitutional protections. Let's have some protections that say you must ask a judge for a warrant. Some have said, how would we get these people? How would we capture those who are transferring weapons? We would investigate. We have all kinds of tools, and we've been using these tools. Others have said, well, we've captured these people through the Patriot Act and we never could have gotten them. The problem with that argument is it's unprovable. You can tell me that you've captured people through the Patriot Act, and I can believe you've captured them and you've prosecuted them, but you can't prove to me that you wouldn't have captured them had you not asked for a judge. We have a special court. It's called the FISA court. The FISA court's been around since the late 1970s. Not one warrant was ever turned down before the Patriot Act. But they say we need more power. We need more power given to these agencies, and we don't need any constitutional restraint anymore. But my question is, the Fourth Amendment said you had to have a probable cause, you had to name the person and the place. Well, how do we change and get rid of probable cause and change it to a standard of relevance? How do we do that and amend the Constitution without actually amending the Constitution? These are important constitutional questions. But when the Patriot Act came up, we were so frightened by 9/11 that it just flew through here. There weren't enough copies to be read. There was one copy at the time. No senator read the Patriot Act. It didn't go through the standard procedure. And look at what's happening now. 10 years later, you'd think the fear and hysteria would have gotten to such a level that we could go through the committee process. Senator Leahy's bill went to committee. It was deliberated upon. It was discussed. It was debated. It was passed out with bipartisan support. It came to the floor with bipartisan support. But you know why it's not getting a vote now? Because they backed us up against a deadline. There have people who have implied in print that if I hold the Patriot Act up and they attack us tonight, that I'm responsible for the attack. There have been people who have implied that if some terrorist gets a gun, that I'm somehow responsible. It's sort of the analogy of saying that because I believe that you should get a warrant before you go into a potential or alleged murderer's house, that somehow I'm in favor of murder. I'm in favor of having constitutional protections. These arose out of hundreds of years of common law. They were codified in our Constitution because we were worried. We were incredibly concerned about what the king had done. We were concerned about what a far distant parliament was doing to us without our approval. We were concerned about what James Otis called writs of assistance. Writs of assistance were pieces of paper that were warrants that were written by soldiers. They were telling us we had to house the British soldiers in our house, and they were giving general warrants, which meant we're just going to search you willy-nilly. We're not going to name the person or place. We're not going to name the crime you're accused of. If a government were comprised of angels, we wouldn't need the Fourth Amendment. What I argue for here now is protections that protect us all should we get a despot, should we someday elect somebody who doesn't have respect for rights. We should obey rules and laws. Is this an isolated episode that we're here talking about the Patriot Act and that there's an insufficient time? It's a deadline, hurry, hurry, we must act. It's not an isolated time. We've had no sufficient debate on the war with Libya. We are now encountered in a war in Libya. So we now have a war in which there's been no congressional debate and no congressional vote. But you know what they argue? They say it's just a little war. But you know what? It's a big principle. It's the principle that we as a country elect people. It's a principle that we are restrained by the Constitution, that you are protected by the Constitution. And if I ask the young men and women here today to go to war and say we are going to go to war, that there darn well should be a debate in this body.